Put your right hand over your heart, ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which is standing one nation, thank you. Madam Secretary, if we could have the roll call, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Paris is not present. Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
Division 1, Drew Mercy.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane.
Here.
Attorney Markman.
Here.
General Manager Knutson.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Thank you much. Our next order is voluntary public roll call. So we always appreciate hearing who's joined us. And so this would be the time just to identify yourself and appreciate you being on.
Vincent Dino, Palmdale Water District.
And welcome.
Johnny Ted, AV Mutual Group.
Yeah, welcome very much.
Kathy McClare, Palmdale Water District.
And welcome.
Hi, George. This is John Joyce.
Hey, John. Glad you're on.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to item number 5, public comments. Period open to the public. So if there's any public comments, if somebody's not on the agenda, you're welcome to do so now. Okay, we'll move on to adoption of an agenda.
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda. There's a key.
Director Dias, we have a motion.
Director Miller, second.
We have a motion, Director Miller. If there's no further comments or questions, we'll have to have a roll call, right, Madam Secretary?
Yes. Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Keith Dias. Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, thank you. That'll bring us on to item number 7, consent calendar. I think we just have one item on there, approval of the minutes of the board meeting of August 8th. And so, motion to be in order for a consent calendar. Yes.
Mr. President, I'll move on 7A1.
Second. This is key.
Give me a motion, second by Director Miller, second by Director Dias. If there's no further questions, all in Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. That'll bring us down to item number 8. Finance Committee, and Frank Donato is chairman of that committee. Frank, we'll turn it over to you.
It'd be better if I had, well, okay, I can go ahead and do it. It's not a problem. I was there. Okay, so item 8A1, consideration and possible action to accept and file the check registry list for the period of August 31st, 23 through September 13, 23.
Well, we can take a minute and we can look at those checks. And the Finance Committee can look at them in somewhat detail. Okay, if there's no further questions or on those.
Yeah, this is Director Donato. Move we accept Board Order 8A1.
Okay, a motion by Director Donato. Second by Director Dias. Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. And
Okay,
that'll bring-
that brings us to Board Order 8H2. Consider possible action to accept and file Treasurer's Report for the month ending August 31st, 2023.
and Teresa, you're going to
Yeah.
go over that one.
Yeah, thank you, Director Donato. Good evening, directors. This is the Treasurer's Report for August. And average yield to maturity for the total portfolio was 3.744%, which was up 0.225% from the prior month. Average days to maturity for the total portfolio was 239 days, or approximately 8 months. And total cash and investments at August 31st was 117.7 million, which was down 1.2 million from the prior month. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions from the board or anybody listening in? You know, really, Teresa, I think we've been quite well. We're not underwater like some people had in the past, so it looks like we're in good condition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Director Donato, I'll move on Board Order 882 that we approve the Treasurer's Report.
This
Okay,
is
we have a
Director
motion.
Director Mercy, second.
Mercy is second.
Director Mercy is the second. Okay. Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris, Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried.
That
Yeah,
concludes the finance.
Thank you. Then, Director Donato, we'll move right on to Water Bank, and you're chairman of that committee. So we've got
Okay.
one item there.
Yeah, so this is Board Order 2. It's consideration and possible action on the approval of the High Desert Water Bank storage agreement between AVAC and Antelope Valley Water Masters. And our general manager at Knudsen is going to go ahead and go over that.
All right. Thank you, Director Donato. Good evening, board. So I've got a brief presentation to go through, but, we've been talking about this storage agreement for a couple months now, and we're to the point where we're comfortable with the language in it. We've sought feedback from a number of parties associated with it. And so what we're asking for this evening is support for agreement of or approval of the water storage and recovery agreement between AVAC and the Water Master. So just a little background, per the Antelope Valley adjudication and the judgment, water banking projects that were not grandfathered in or pre-existing to the judgment being signed have to enter into a storage agreement with the Water Master. Hello?
Director Donato?
That wasn't me.
I thought you said somebody was here for you.
Ingrid was here.
Oh, she left?
Okay, we'll continue. So have to enter into a storage agreement with the Water Master. So AVAC's existing West Side Water Bank and our East Side Water Banks are exempt from having a storage agreement per the judgment. The purpose of a storage agreement is really to identify a few things in the agreement. It relies heavily on the CEQA document that's been adopted for the particular project. It identifies sources and quality of the water being stored in the groundwater basin. Describes the operation of the project when it comes to recharge and recovery facilities. And during the review of the storage agreement application, the Water Master engineer may require certain conditions of approval in order to mitigate any material injury or impact to other groundwater producers in the basin. Our storage agreement also acknowledges previously stored water that AVAC recharged within the High Desert Water Bank back in 2016, 2017 timeframe as part of the preliminary work that we were doing. So that's about 5,200 acre feet. And we wanted to make sure that was acknowledged and credited in the storage agreement. So a little bit about the timeline. We relied on information prepared by the agency's engineers on the project, both the design team and the hydrogeology team that worked on the modeling for the groundwater storage project. And they not only modeled recharge, what happens with the water when it's recharged and put into the ground, but also during events of recovery mode, what impacts we can predict there will be to the water level and any impacts to adjacent wells. So we submitted our application back in April of this year to the Water Master Engineer, which is Todd Groundwater. Between April and May, we had a couple of different meetings with the engineer, answering questions about the project and providing more detail. Then between June and August, staff and legal counsel drafted the actual storage agreement. We worked closely with Tejon Ranch because, as you know, they operate their existing water bank just adjacent to AVAC's existing High Desert Water Bank. We wanted to make sure they were comfortable with the operation of the project and the language in the agreement between AVAC and the Water Master.
Is Tejon, last time I went by there, I saw no water, but they're operating that now?
This year they are banking water in their water bank. So I can't remember the exact volume, but it's in the 5,000 to 10,000 acre feet range of volume that they've banked there. And then they also operate 2 existing groundwater production wells within the project boundary of the High Desert Water Bank. So we really evaluated the impact to those wells in our groundwater model for our project. Then here we are in September. Last week, we presented the agreement and the conditions to the advisory committee of the Water Master, and they are supportive of the project and are recommending approval of the storage agreement. So tomorrow or tonight, hopefully our AVAC board will approve the agreement, and then tomorrow it is on the agenda with the Water Master board to consider approval of. And then once we get through tomorrow, assuming it's approved, it'll be finalized. So, and the only follow-up to this agreement will be to submit a mitigation and monitoring plan within 6 months to the Water Master. And we had planned on preparing that mitigation and monitoring plan all along. It was one of the conditions or mitigations in the CEQA document that we approved several years ago. So that's nothing new that we weren't already planning to do. Under the second bullet there, you can see some of the conditions or findings that the Water Master Engineer found. And this really mimics what we've identified in the CEQA document. So nothing new here. It talks about the 10% leave behind, that we can only recover 90% of the water that we bank or store. It talks about the 70,000 acre feet of recharge and recovery, 280,000 acre feet of total storage volume. References the requirement to install meters on each individual well, which we plan to do anyways. We have to report annually to the Water Master activity from the prior year, any recharge activity or recovery activity. That's just part of the annual reporting to the Water Master. And then we gets into some of the items mentioned earlier that are referenced in the CEQA document, such as the mitigation and monitoring plan, to kind of cease or reduce recharge if the groundwater level gets within 75 feet of the California aqueduct. That's right out of the CEQA document. And then obviously we're going to monitor groundwater level and water quality to ensure no impact to surrounding domestic wells, both for recharge activity and recovery. So those are kind of highlights of the conditions in the agreement. In your board packet on page 61 is the actual agreement. It's fairly short. As mentioned, Jim Markman worked hard on this, getting the language just right. The water master attorney or general counsel is also comfortable with the language, so I think it's in good condition and ready to move forward with approval.
Okay, is there any questions from the board?
Yeah, Gary, I've got a question. How long is this storage agreement good for?
So that's a good question, Gary. There is no term on the agreement, so it's perpetual. So there's no sunset on it.
Okay. Do all storage agreements have a 10% leave behind, or just this one?
So this is one of the first ones with the water master. There's a storage agreement for the Upper Amargosa project that also has a 10% leave behind. Little Rock Creek Irrigation District has a storage agreement. That project has a 10% leave behind. And the 10% is also consistent with what AVAC has committed to for the West Side Water Bank and the East Side Water Bank.
Okay. Why wouldn't you want to put it into a carryover, keep it in carryover, put it, instead of a storage agreement? Carryover doesn't have the 10% leave behind.
So carryover is only for native groundwater in the basin or return flows. So the 10% is taking into account any water losses during the recharge activity. So there's only a one-time 10% loss. So it's only applied when we import the water and start recharging it. And the 10% is intended to take into account any evaporation.
Oh, does that include the 4.2%?
Where are you referring to, George?
On page 4, 1.4. Anticipated evaporation loss is 4.2% of the total recharge volume, 2,940 acre feet, therefore 70,000 acre feet. So I was wondering if that evaporation loss, if that's above the line, 70,000 acre feet, or that's taken off at 70,000.
So when we recharge initially, let's say year one, we recharge 70,000 acre feet. That 10% is applied. So in the following year, you can only recover 63,000 acre feet.
What about the evaporation?
Yeah, that evaporation rate is right out of the, what report do you remember, Justin? The report that was used for determining the ET. It's tied to the evapo transfer.
But is that part of the 10% amount?
Yeah, that is. That's not in addition to the 10%. That's within the 10%.
So our leave behind is going to be somewhat less than 10%.
Correct. Yeah, it's going to be the difference between 10% and the actual evaporation rate.
How much is the cost of the storage agreement back?
So the fee that we paid to the water master was we made a $15,000 deposit, and that covers the water master engineer's time and legal counsel time for the water master. So the intent there is to make sure that the existing producers, the cost of processing the application, it does not come out of their assessments. The project proponent, in this case, AVAC and Metropolitan Water District, covers the cost of the storage agreement.
Is that based on the acre foot that's stored, or how'd you come up with that amount?
So that's an amount that the water master engineer came up with. Like I said, it's a deposit amount, and then they'll true up the actual hours spent on this and either, hopefully issue a refund for that expense. So AVEC did not come up with that amount. The water master engineer came up with the deposit amount.
Matt, or other water banks are not subject to this, but we still have to report, do we not?
Yeah, we report every year the same information as far as water levels, how much we recharged, how much we recovered from each of the banks to the water master. And all of that information in a water accounting is included in the annual report approved by the water master. So it's a very transparent process and all the numbers are provided.
Okay, does the board, anybody have any questions for staff on this? Director Donato, are you recommending approval of this?
Yes, the committee was recommend approving this. So I'll go ahead and make a motion on AB1 that we approve the agreement between AVEC and the Antelope Valley Water Master.
Second, Van Dam.
We have a motion, Director Donato, second, Director Van Dam. There's no further questions, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lee.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, thank you. Good job. Moving on to Water Master Groundwater Stewardship Committee. And Director Parrish is chairman of this. He's not with us today. And so either one of the committee members, or we'll turn it over to Matt. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, I can take the lead on this if the committee's fine with that. So, as you know, we have the Water Master meeting tomorrow here at AVAC and on Zoom. And this is with Director Parrish being out on vacation, I'm going to fill in for him as the alternate for the Water Master Board meeting tomorrow. And this is our opportunity as the AVAC board to go through the agenda and give me clear direction on the items up for consideration tomorrow. So in your board packet is a brief staff report on page 134, followed by the actual agenda for the Water Master meeting tomorrow. And I'll just go through, kind of hit the highlights that I thought were hot buttons for tomorrow, and we can talk about each of them and get direction on each of those. So the first one is action item number 9, which is consideration and possible action on amendment to the rules and regs or the unanimous requirements within the rules and regs. This is regarding voting for any action item on the Water Master agenda. So ever since 2016, when the Water Master Board was formed, we've had a 5-0 requirement on pretty much every decision of the board. Amazingly, when we've been able to get to a consensus with that 5-0 requirement for the past 7 years. But recently we had one topic come up, and that was a dispute on a transfer, and AVAC decided to, we had both a recusal and a conflict. So Director Parrish had a conflict. He couldn't participate in that vote. So I stepped in as the alternate, and the board direction was to recuse myself from that vote. So obviously that one item caused certain board members to request looking into the rules and regulations of the Water Master to see if there's interest in changing that voting requirement for those situations where both the primary board representative and the alternate for some reason cannot vote on the item. So what you see on the screen is the proposed language to the revising the rules and regs. And in simple terms, it says if both the primary and alternate have to recuse themselves or conflicted out, then the item can proceed as long as it gets a 4-0 vote of the remaining board members. So
the advisory committee, they recommended against this?
Correct. That's a good point, Director Lane. So this item was discussed last week with the advisory committee. And I'm looking at the notes here. They voted 6-2. 6 advisory members voted no, or they voted yes to recommend not approving this item. So 6 of the 8 that voted at the advisory committee recommend not approving this amendment. I'll tell you my personal opinion on it. This requirement or this change, I don't see it as a huge impact, because if the primary and alternate are choosing not to vote, then the topic must not be that important to them, or they're conflicted out. So if an item is critical to that party, they could simply stay in and not recuse themselves and vote. That's my personal view, but I think we should respect the feedback from the advisory committee, take that into consideration, and like I said, this item is up for a vote tomorrow, so it would be good to get some clear direction on what the AVAC board would like me to vote on this item.
Okay, so any comments by the board would be in order now.
Yeah, Matt, this is Gary. So when you're saying the advisory board said on a no vote, that's to keep it the same as the 5-0?
Yeah, so majority of the advisory committee recommended to keep it the way it is now. Only 2 of the 8 voting advisory members voted to change it.
Okay, I was on that advisory board, and I also recommend that we keep it the same as what it was.
Yeah, Director Lane, my comments would be that we should probably keep it the same for now. We can look at it next year, but we're in a transition state. We're looking at a lot of things. It's fairly new to us. Maybe we should get just a little more time before we make a decision on
that. This is Director Donato. I just want to make this statement. The only thing is negative is that everybody's going to be paying $10 an acre foot when this gets over with, because every time there's one person abstains, it's got to go back to the engineer and the attorney to review what the new changes are. You're adding another anywhere 20 to 30% more legal costs and engineering costs because one person disagrees. But if that's what they want to do, that's fine. But don't be crying why the advisory people, why things are going up. So we know it. Nobody in the Antelope Valley pays more attorney fees than AVAC. With our 3 or 4 different attorneys, every time it goes back to somebody, we're paying double, sometimes triple, because it had to be reviewed again because they changed 3 or 4 words in a sentence. I just want to bring that to everybody's attention.
Director Miller?
Yeah, Director Miller here. Well, if I'm understanding this correctly, this event that is addressed in the proposal has only happened once on the water board, and I can see where there are times that may never change a decision. I'm sort of pulled back and forth because there won't be a decision made when this happens. However, it does not happen often.
Yeah, oh, wait. I'm gonna interrupt that. I'm sorry, Audrey, you're wrong, and I'll say that because every time they table it is because they did a verbal count of the members. It's probably happened 10, 20 times. Every time they table it, that is a no vote. Just remember that. Every time they table it, it goes back to the attorneys and the other people. If somebody could give me the numbers of how many times the organization has tabled something to go back and review it, that is a no vote.
Okay, Mr. Director.
I'm not changing your opinion, but you made a comment. I just want to back it up because I'm on these meetings all the time listening. Just remember, every time it's tabled, that's a no vote.
Okay, well, we don't have a number of times things have been tabled. The only thing I have is how many times that this situation has happened. And we can certainly give direction to take a look at the tabling, but I think at this point in time, we need to go with the opinion of the advisory committee. And then if it needs to be looked into further, continue forward. That's my opinion.
Good comments. Now, this can be changed at any time, but right now we just need a consensus from the board. And it appears that the majority of the board is in favor of keeping this the way it is, unless we hear otherwise.
This is Drew. I agree.
Okay. Okay, not hearing other objections to it. Matt, you've got...
yeah, it sounds like we have a consensus from the board that we want to stick with the 5-0 requirement and not...
It's always going to be looked at again.
Yeah.
And it probably will be.
Yeah.
No. I want to vote. I want to vote from our board. The consensus is not, I'm not voting yes on that. Okay? So for the public, as a director, there should be a vote from this board that states who is, because when we come back a year from now or 6 months from now, when the cost comes up, the members of this board will be responsible. Okay? None of this a consensus, because I'm abstaining from the vote. Okay? Because I disagree, and I don't agree that the advisory committee runs this board. I'm elected by the people, not by the advisory board. Okay? Just remember that. We're elected by our district, by our people, not an advisory board. So if that's the way the board, AVAC board wants to start now being, have the advisory people control AVAC board, so be it. That's not so be it. That's everybody's own discretion. But I want a roll call vote on who supports it and who doesn't support it.
Okay, that's probably no criminal. And so I think, Madam Secretary, we would have a roll call vote, and the item would be to keep it as it presently is. We would vote, let me see if
we should get a motion in a second.
Yeah, but I'm talking about what the motion's going to be.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion, Van Dam.
Yes, you're. That'll be the motion would be we vote yes to keep it as it is, and no if we want to change it.
All right, yes to keep it.
Yes to keep it as it is. And again, Frank, this can be looked at any time in the future. Madam Secretary.
Who's a second? I need a second.
Oh, a second.
I'll second the motion. This is Director Dias.
Director Dias.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
No.
George Lane.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Motion carried. And we'll move on to item number 11.
All right. So next item on the Water Master agenda is formation of ad hoc committee that's comprised of Director Calandry, myself as the alternate, and then Chair Dennis Lamoureux from the advisory committee. And this recommendation is by Director Paris, the chair of the Water Master Board. And this came out of the last closed session of the Water Master meeting, where the decision was made by the board to try to negotiate with Hallmark Group for a 2024 contract. So this ad hoc committee, made up of Directors Landry, myself, and then Advisory Committee Chair Dennis Lamoureux, would be tasked to try to sit down with the Hallmark Group and negotiate a fee and scope of work for calendar year 2024. Let's see, the feedback from the advisory committee. So this also failed. A motion recommending approval of this item failed based on a 2-5-1 vote.
Do you approve? Do you approve working with Hallmark?
So the comments from the advisory committee, and Director Van Dam can jump in here, but the basic consensus was the advisory committee has been asking to go out with a new RFP for 2024 admin services to look for a new administrator or see what else is out there. But the board, the Water Master Board at the last meeting in closed session had a discussion, and they came out of closed session and recommended trying to negotiate with the Hallmark Group. So this ad hoc committee is in reaction to the motion or the direction given by the board.
So to reinstate that, you're saying that the 5-member AV Water Master Board of Directors made a recommendation to work it out with the Hallmark Group, and the advisory group said they would want to go out to bid. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct, Director Donato.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Gary. Let me jump in here a minute. The reason why we wanted to go out to bid was the change order factor on all those amendments. We know that, I think it was amendment number 2 in there, Matt, that was 13,000. That wasn't, that was a recommendation from an outside party to, for another fee. But all the other ones are add-ons, and the thing is with Hallmark is they started out at 165,000, and then all of a sudden they jump up to 225, and send out an assessment of $4.50 an acre that all us landowners had to pay. And so I don't blame the advisory board for being upset with Hallmark. With that being said, I think maybe there is, if we were to have the ad hoc committee in place, and then we gave Hallmark a scope, and they gave us their scope of work that they were going to do not to exceed, and then anything that exceeds that, maybe we go out and have Palmdale or somebody else do some outside work. That concerns me also, because then all of a sudden Hallmark's pushing all their work off onto that outside, administrative staff. So there's a couple things to look at, Matt, but go ahead.
Yeah, those are good comments, Director Van Dam. So I think Director Donato kind of summed it up good, that the direction from the Water Master Board is to try to negotiate with Hallmark Group, and I'll put all the feelings from the various parties about the performance of Hallmark on the side. I think, we went through a search process last year. Hallmark has been at it for a year. I think it doesn't hurt to try to negotiate a 2024 contract and see where it goes. Maybe we won't get there, but at this point, it won't cost the Water Master any money, because these folks that are going to be on the ad hoc committee are not compensated. And I think we'd give it a try, at least give it a good effort to try to negotiate something.
Well, I have a comment to that, back up to that. I just asked a question. It was the 5-member board, the AV Water Master voted to continue to process and work it out with Hallmark. I am not voting against our appointee, Rob Paris, who's on that board, to change any other decision. The Water Master asked for it. We, as a board of directors of AVAC, owe the respect to our fellow director who represented, that we put on there to represent AVAC, and to go against him and the Water Master Board, I think it's just completely unfair and not reasonable.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think, George, that, these change orders that Hallmark had come up with, they just got to know that that's unacceptable. Going into this new deal, I believe if they're not going to, agree a contract, they didn't agree to the 23 contract. What's going to make them agree to the 24 contract? So somewhere along the lines, guys, we've got to hold their feet to the fire. And if they're going to get in this thing, get in it. And not one time have they cut their fees. But guess what? They came to AVAC for I believe, an advancement, George. Wasn't that right? They wanted some money in advance. That just means they're going to run out earlier next year.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the contract is broken, and we don't have a good situation. But where do we go from here? We've got to have somebody. And I would like, again, won't be ours, and this board we can just advise, but we would hope maybe the Water Master could be looking for somebody, or a representative could be looking for someone else, maybe at the same time negotiating with Hallmark, because we don't know if it's going to go through or not. Is there anybody in the public who would like to address this? Anybody listening in?
Mr. Lane, this is Julie Kyle.
Yes, Julie.
I sat in on the advisory board as an alternate for my husband at that last particular meeting. Just so, Mr. Donato, this kind of is directed to you. When, after the September meeting, closed session, and announced that they were going to enter into contract negotiations for 2024, it was shocking to the advisory committee, because the advisory committee had been asking for an RFP to be sent out since January of 2023. And to be honest with you, their requests were completely disregarded by the Water Master Board. And we have continued every month, the advisory board has continued every month to discuss it, knowing that it was going to take time to send out an RFP. And it wasn't going to be an extra cost. We had an agency that was willing to do that at their own cost. It wouldn't have cost the Water Master Board anything. But it was just frustrating for the advisory board to not even be able to be in on that conversation. That was where our issue was with the ad hoc, to just have it put on us and no discussion of all of those members of the advisory that put in their time, and effort to try to work things out and make a good deal. So I just wanted a little clarification there for you. I appreciate it, Mr. Lane.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And this might be kind of sensitive, but again, we've got an engineer, and it's important to be professional and courteously to people. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's always the case. And sometimes it's very difficult if you can't talk to somebody in a civil way. And to me, that would weigh heavy. Again, that's sensitive. Nobody wants to comment on it, but I think that's the fact.
I agree with you, George. That came up many times in our advisory meeting about how the advisory board is getting treated by, the Hallmark group, and very disrespectful, one, and two, like I said, just the agenda was another thing that all of a sudden they didn't make it up for us, and they said it wasn't in their scope of work. Well, it was in AVAC's scope of work when they took on the bid. So you tell me where it got, the ball got dropped.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't, if anybody wants to emotionally can do that. Otherwise, we'll get a consensus. But my recommendation would be to look for another firm while dealing with Hallmark concurrently, or at least make some overtures.
George, I didn't understand what you said. Can you repeat that, please?
Yep, we would go ahead and deal with Hallmark. At the same time, we would be looking for another firm and at least open the discussions. And so it would just like we did when we first did the contract. We'd be dealing with more than one firm right there. But I think we had 3 people that submitted bids.
Well, wait, I just heard from Matt that 5 of the board of directors went into closed session, came back and says they want to continue to work with them. And one of them is our AVAC director.
Well, AVAC's making a recommendation. And so whether AVAC is making a recommendation to our representative, and Matt's going to be at that meeting tomorrow. So, we don't have final say so. All we can do is make a recommendation.
Recommendation for what?
How the new water master is chosen.
Well, wait. I'm making recommendation for what? You're not saying recommendation for what?
If you would negotiate just with Hallmark, or you would be looking for other options also, like we did when we first did the contract.
No, that's not what so you're saying that take whatever the advisory committee said over the board of directors, that's what you're saying?
No, I'm saying my opinion is I'm
trying to find out what
my opinion is an AVAC director, Frank.
You know what? Make a motion in there. I'm not going against Rob or the 5-member board.
Part of the decision tomorrow. That may be part of where we go, but I think tomorrow we should keep it focused on formation of the ad hoc to try to negotiate with the Hallmark group. Whether you want to approve or recommend me approving the formation of that ad hoc.
Could that committee also look at other options?
Definitely. I think that would be the prudent thing to do, to keep options open as we're having those discussions and think of alternatives in the event that the negotiations do not work out.
So can we make a recommendation that the committee be formed?
Yeah, that's all we need tomorrow.
But can we add the caveat or suggestion?
That it's not on the agenda that way, but yeah.
That's what I'm trying to
do the committee or not do the committee.
Yeah, let's stick with just the formation of the ad hoc for now.
And if we decide not to recommend the committee, what happens from there?
Well, I guess if the board tomorrow does not vote to 5-0 to approve the committee, then the committee doesn't get formed, and we're kind of in limbo.
Okay, time's running out, so we need a consensus from the board if we want to have a roll call vote or just have a consensus.
A roll call vote, please.
Okay, one would be yes to have the committee, no not to have the committee. So we need a motion.
First of all, somebody's going to make a motion, and there's got to be a second.
We need a motion to that effect.
This is Director Dias. I'll make a motion that we support the formation of the committee.
Van Dam, second.
Madam Secretary.
Well, I got to say something else. This is completely out of order when the recommendation, and Matt knows this, that when we had a meeting last week which Rob Paris was the chairman, this was not even discussed. So it looks like there's some backdoor meetings going on that the three committee directors know nothing about.
I don't
answer that, Mr. President. Answer that for me. And Gary, we knew nothing about this, what's being proposed.
Well, our board is making a recommendation whether that committee should be formed or not. And we have a motion on the floor. And if there's any further if there's any further comments, and we'd like to hear from anybody. If not, Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam?
Yes.
Audrey Miller?
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
I abstain.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. And so the board is giving Matt the support and the vote in favor of the committee.
Great, thank you. So I know we're getting there. We got a few more items. The next two items, item 11 and 12 on tomorrow's agenda, is approval of two amendments with the Hallmark Group. So on the screen there, you can see the amendments approved to date. Starting at the top, we had the original contract of $164,000 with the Hallmark Group. Amendment number one was $20,000 to cover the cost of transitioning in late 2022 from Avek to the Hallmark Group. Amendment number two for $13,000 was at the direction of the Water Master Board to have Hallmark Group put together a financial plan and long-term budget for $13,000. Amendment three was some discrepancies in the audit from a couple years prior that the Hallmark Group discovered and their time and effort working through those discrepancies. Amendment number four, as you know, the Water Master approved a supplemental assessment a couple months ago for $4.50. So that $5,400 amendment was Hallmark's time and effort associated with sending invoices out for that supplemental assessment. Excuse me. And then we have two pending amendments, number 5 and 6. They're being considered tomorrow. Amendment 5 is additional services through the end of this calendar year, about $24,000 to cover the time and effort associated with the board meetings and advisory committee, the packets, etc. And then Amendment 6 is there was a public records request submitted by the Barrel Springs project to the Water Master. So that $1,400 amendment associated with their time responding to the public records request.
Is that it? Are they responsible for the cost you were requesting or not so?
So amendment number 6, in my opinion, is clearly outside of their scope of work.
But who's responsible for the payment?
The Water Master.
The person that requested is not responsible?
So that's going to be a question asked tomorrow and some direction, hopefully given to legal counsel to try to recoup some of that cost from the person requesting the public records. Because an agency can recoup some costs. Whether we'll be able to recoup all the costs, I think that's a question for legal counsel tomorrow. Or maybe, I don't know if Jim probably doesn't want to chime in on this, but we'll leave that to Craig Parton.
I might say something he would that would be good.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to contradict each other. But so staff and as well as the advisory committee recommend amendment number 6. That's the $1,400 one. Amendment number 5, that was recommended to be denied by the advisory committee. I think the feelings there is that scope should have been included in the original $164,000 proposal. I think tomorrow's some of the questions and discussion or questions will be asked of Craig Parton based on the contract language and interpretation of the contract language for the original $164,000. So my recommendation this evening is kind of wait and see how those discussions go tomorrow and kind of see where it goes and give me some latitude and to vote either way based on those discussions.
Yeah, Matt, this is Gary. I agree with that. Part of it is when somebody comes outside, from the outside is asking Hallmark, for records and all these outside, record keeping and stuff. That's all put on the water master, and then eventually it ends up on our assessments and supplementals. It's really not fair to us. So I think that anybody that comes in there and has recommended that to them, and wants that work to be, scope work to be done by Hallmark, to be fair to Hallmark, they, first of all, they maybe need to review that and bring that before the board to see if they, can do that instead of just adding it on to our bills. That's what, I'm kind of thinking. It's not fair to us.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in a situation where if we want to give, Matt that authority to make his decision tomorrow. And, in the future, we probably should do that. But where we're at now, we probably should, Matt should have that authority.
Director Mercy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just say that when it comes to public records requests, my understanding is you can, the person requesting the information can be made to pay for it as long as it's reasonable, respects actual staff time. The law there being, some agencies don't hike up fees to dissuade people from making public record requests. So, yeah, I would definitely want to check with council. We recommend working with the Water Master Council to find out how we set that up so that they are reasonable, because if Hallmark is charging people for those requests, they should reflect, real, actual, reasonable costs.
Yeah. Sounds good. And again, my recommendation to the AVEC board is kind of give me latitude to vote either way on both.
Is there any objection from the board as far as giving Matt latitude for these costs?
I have none.
Okay, if there's no objection, Matt, I think
okay.
That direction.
Thank you. We're almost done here. I'm going to turn it over to Angel to talk about the next few items. I took the easy ones, so she's going to take the hard ones.
Okay.
Good evening, board members. So the next item on the Water Master agenda is item number 13. It's the update on the 2024 Water Master budget. This is an information only item for tomorrow's meeting. On page 140 of your agenda packet is a list of draft administrative budget components that the Water Master staff will present for review and consideration. The Hallmark Group developed these draft budget components based on feedback provided by the board and the advisory committee. Going forward, their projected timeline for the 2024 budget is September. They will present the draft budget components for review and consideration. And then October, present final draft budget based on the approved budget components. And December, they will present final budget for adoption. Does anybody have any questions? No?
Very clear.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. The next item will be item 14, and this is an action item. It's consideration and possible action on the groundwater banking and recovery storage program. This is the approval of the High Desert Water Bank Storage Agreement between AVEC and the Water Master that Matt discussed earlier. And I'm assuming your direction is that he approved this storage agreement, so I won't get into further detail.
Thanks.
Okay. And next item are the applications. There were 2 new production applications that went in front of the advisory committee. One for Lizette Mesa for 1.5 acre feet per year for domestic use for a single family home and fruit trees. The Water Master Advisory Committee did request that this application be tabled. This property is located within the Palmdale Water District boundaries, and they are requesting a letter from Palmdale Water District before the application goes before the board. The next new production application is Kevin Williams. He is requesting 1 acre-foot per year for industrial use for 2 metal buildings for personal storage with half bathrooms. That application will be considered tomorrow at the Water Master meeting. Does anybody have any questions on the new production applications? Okay, so there's one transfer application. This transfers from Jeff Siebert to AV Water Trust. It's a 100 acre-foot, one-time temporary transfer of carryover water. This transfer is at this time for investment purposes only, and AV Water Trust will be required to submit additional applications in the future before they use this water. Anybody have any questions on the transfer application?
Thank you, Angel.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you much, Angel. Okay, we had the one item 8C1. Matt, I'm going to defer to you, but I think we've already given guidance. I'm not sure if we need a separate motion on that.
Correct. Yeah, I think we've covered everything we need direction on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you much. Okay, then we'll move down to item number D, Customer Relations and Public Information Committee, and Director Dias is chairman of that committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The Customer Relations and Public Information Committee met last Wednesday, September 20th, to discuss the 5 candidates for the Special District LAFCO alternate member. We do have a recommendation, but I'm going to let Matt make a report regarding that.
All right. Thank you, Director Dias. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Pam Clark. As you know, she filled in for me at the meeting, this committee meeting, and she did a lot of legwork on this item. So take it away, Pam.
Well, good evening, members of the board. On page 142 of your board packet, you'll find a brief staff report, but I'll provide a little more background. So due to a vacancy, elections are being held for the LA County Special District Local Agency Formation Commission, also known as LAFCO, alternate member for the term that's expiring May 2026. And as a reminder, LAFCOs are countywide regulatory agencies that are responsible for reviewing and approving jurisdictional boundary changes, such as annexations or the formation of new special districts. And Avek is an independent special district in LA County, so they're authorized to vote in the election. And we have 5 candidates running in the election, and Avek can vote for 1 candidate. And the ballots are due October 27th. Okay, so as Director Dias mentioned, the Customer Relations and Public Information Committee met on September 19th and reviewed qualifications of all 5 candidates. They first narrowed it down to 3 candidates with water agency experience in their bios, and they assessed each individual's qualifications. In a brief summary, candidate number 1 is Stephen H. Brown. He's a board member for Kinaloa Irrigation District. His professional background is as a lawyer, a public affairs consultant, a DC lobbyist with experience in water issues, and he also volunteers at a local school district. Second is Gary Burns. He's a board member for Las Virgenes Municipal Water District. His professional background is as a partner in a food distribution company, and he's a licensed life insurance broker. Also a community leader, local emergency preparedness volunteer, HOA president, and board member for Community Associations Institute. And last is Sharon Ragavachari. She is a board member for Crescenta Valley Water District. She did not provide a professional background, but is a Crescenta Valley Town Council member and founder of their community association, as well as a community volunteer. And upon further review, the committee concurred to recommend Gary Burns based on being a board member at Las Virgenes Water District, as we mentioned. He's a 35-year resident of LA County with a depth of community leadership experience, broad business background, and most of all, his local focus on finding new water sources and building local water supply reliability. So the committee is recommending to approve voting for candidate Gary Burns for Special District LAFCO, alternate member for LA County.
Is there any comments from the board?
Yeah, this is Gary. How long is this term for?
It would expire in 2026.
In May of 2026.
May of 2026.
Okay. Yeah, I recommend Brown or Burns. I'm sorry.
The board spent a considerable amount of time looking at each applicant, and when we chose one, this is kind of funny. Pam said she knew that's where we were going to choose. So that was good. Okay, so motion would be in order.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we approve voting for Mr. Gary Burns for Special District LAFCO alternate member.
We have a motion by Director Dias.
Director Miller said.
Okay. Director Miller second. If there's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, well, thank you much.
Thank you.
That concludes our report, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you, Director
Good
Dias.
job, Pam. Thank you.
That'll bring us down to item number 9.
Mr. President,
Yes.
this is Drew. Unfortunately, I have to step out of the meeting. I'll be gone for the rest of the meeting.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Bring us to number 9, General Manager's report. Turn it over to you, Matt.
Yes, thank you, Director Lane. So, fairly short GM report this evening because I know Director Miller has a presentation on her recent tour. So, just to hit the highlights, we have our Water Master meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. here at Avek or online. We do have a holiday coming up for Columbus Day on October 9th. Just a reminder that AVAC is hosting the CSDA chapter luncheon here at AVAC on October 12th. So let Holly know if you plan to attend that event. I know a few of you already have. And then Justin received confirmation today from Met that, or not final confirmation, tentative confirmation, that they want to have a ribbon cutting event at the High Desert Water Bank on Halloween, October 31st. So I'm sure in the coming weeks, we'll find out all the details and we'll make sure that's coordinated with the board members and figure out who wants to speak at that event and who's going to attend. You can if you want extra points if you get dress up. So that's you. So that's all I have for the GM report this evening. Next meeting, we'll have a state water project update and operations update.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Matt. And we'll move on to number 10, Director's Reports. And we understand Director Miller took a very good tour recently, and she's got a presentation she wants to.
Yeah, it probably took me 5 hours to write down everything I wanted to say, so I now have maybe 5 minutes. I went with the Water Education Foundation on the Eastern Sierra Nevada tour. And we started up in Reno, and we went to, if you want to move the slide one, if you want to show the map. Oh yeah, let's show the map. So this was a 2.5 day, really 3-day tour. We started up in Reno. All the green areas were the first day. So we hit Reno, Lahontan Reservoir, Walker, Rivers. We came down to spend the night in Bridgeport. And the second day was down between Bridgeport and Lone Pine, and we hit Mono Lake and several places. So I want to tell you about those. And then the last day was all down Owens River, the headwaters of the LA Aqueduct and Owens Lake. So the first place we went up in Reno was the Glendale Treatment Plant. And they talked about they are using this A+ advanced purified water treatment for the water coming through there. Now that's wastewater, and I want to talk to John later. But it showed the different ways that they're filtering this water, and we share a couple ways, the UV and the ozone, but they have others that they use. And they actually had a sample of a bottle of water from, I believe it was Orange County, that actually sells the filtered water after it's been treated. They're going to inject it. They either inject it in the ground or they put it into the Truckee River so that it can go out for agricultural use as well. So at least they're recycling their wastewater. We went east from Truckee, following the Truckee River, to the Derby Dam, which is the first reclamation project for the Bureau of Reclamation in the U.S. It was around the turn of the century, 1900s, when it went in, and its purpose was to move water from the Truckee River to the Lahontan Reservoir. And so still water moving to Pyramid Lake, but also water moving to Lahontan. And so we continued down there. It's not a very big structure, and we couldn't get any closer with the bus. So that's the closest picture I could get of it. But it continues, the river again goes to Pyramid, and then the canal that was made goes to Lahontan. So we'll continue down that road, and we're going to get over to Lahontan Reservoir. So this is about a 200,000 acre foot reservoir that supplies Fallon, Nevada, and the agricultural area just east of it. They had so much water this year. And by the way, Gary, the farmers decide when the water come out of this reservoir. They had so much water this year, they had to empty this reservoir 3 times. They directed some of it to agriculture. The rest of it, they had to just let it go out into the desert and seep in. But, if you go to the next slide, that'll actually show the dam. Beautiful facility. And I have 10,000 other pictures, but that is actually the dam portion. The Carson River also flows into this reservoir as well. So from that facility, we went west up the Carson River, and we stopped for lunch at this park area that Carson City has set aside. They actually bought a lot of the land along the Carson River in order to preserve it in its natural state and keep developers out of there. They also purchased old ranches, one on each side of the river, to preserve them as well. It's a beautiful area. There's recreation facilities in that, hiking. You can bicycle, and there's a lot of wildlife in this area, and it was very pleasant, very shady, very pleasant. And it made a comparison to the city of Reno. Nothing against Reno, but that's a concrete jungle, and this is just beautiful, beautiful area. So they're using some of the wastewater in there and recycling as well, using a reclamation project. And this is all the same day. Moving down the river, we went up and continued south down to 395, and the Walker River has 2 forks to it. And this is the South Fork of the Walker River. They have had, before this winter, as many in the area, not very much water in the rivers, and they've had to really negotiate how much water could go down the stream. They're a fishery, so they want to make sure they can still stock fish. Well, this winter helped them out, and Hillary helped them out as well, where they Walker Lake, all these two rivers flow into Walker Lake, and it's a terminal lake, so it actually got some flow to it, and it's a salton lake because it's dry most of the time. But there was so much water, they were able to direct it on down the stream. That's a nice little rest stop, by the way, if you're going up the Highway 395. We passed by Topaz Lake, and they did have a representative come and talk to us about how they're using this lake and its facilities, and all the reservoirs were so full. They all had the quote unquote problem of having too much water and how to direct it, but I can't remember exactly what they did there, but it was beautiful, beautiful lake. Continuing on down the road, here's our beautiful Mono Lake. And there's a lot of stuff happening with Mono. One of the things that I noticed, because I hadn't gone since the 70s or early 80s by Mono Lake, and at that time it was very, very low. And the public trust came into effect and made a determination that the lake elevation had to be up to the 6392 elevation by 2014, which it's about 10 feet short of that right now in an elevation. There's another slide that shows from these tufas that are formed by natural springs, and it's underwater when the spring starts forming these tufas, and once they're above the water level, they don't form anymore. So a lot of the tufas, lake level was way, way down, and they were not forming anymore. So what you see there, it'll still remain. As a matter of fact, can't really see it, but on the tallest tufa, there on the left, there's a gull that's nesting right there. And then there's another one, Holly, almost right in the middle to the back, right there. That's an osprey's nest. So there's a lot of migrating birds that come through here. And one of the things that happens if their nests are disturbed or their migration is disturbed, they won't come back to the same place. So we've got to see the wildlife there and how the lake is recovering in height, mainly because originally the LA aqueduct waters were for all four streams. All four streams that fed Mono Lake were directed through the LA aqueduct, and they were directed not to take all that water for themselves down the aqueduct. So two of the streams now still will feed Mono Lake. Very beautiful area. We got to go near the Crater Mountains, where there's a 13 section of underground tunneling that happened for the LA aqueduct from the streams. And we also saw up on the mountainside some of the diversions, the little canals that they make in order to divert over to the aqueduct. And I'm taking more than 5 minutes, so I'll speed it up here. There was so much information and so many great speakers from Southern California Edison and the Bureau of Reclamation and the Coalition of the Tribes and DWP and it's very hard to condense this into just a few minutes, but we did go up on the June Lake Loop, and we saw the Rush Creek Powerhouse, and that's that there. By the way, they had many avalanches in this section on 395, and Bridgeport was actually isolated for 6 weeks during the winter because of the avalanches, and there were avalanches to the north of them. They had to have the National Guard fly in supplies to them up in Bridgeport. So the 200 people who were there could survive too. But the avalanches all happened around Mono Lake. We can continue down into Long Valley and then the Owens Valley area. This pictures of the upper Owens River. And this river will supply the LA Aqueduct. So that next slide shows where the aqueduct begins. And so this other picture was looking up northerly. And then this one's now going to go southerly for the next slide for the LA Aqueduct. And it continues in open course like this for many miles, and then it gets into a pipeline. And then, of course, the pipeline comes through the Antelope Valley. We did not see that portion of it. The lower Owens River had dried up because all the water was being put into the LA Aqueduct and no water was allowed to go down into the lower Owens, and Owens Lake also dried up at the time. The Public Lands Trust said you can't do that anymore, you need to direct water. So now this top slide, that one sort of far away, but the lower Owens is recovering, and it's pretty twisty turny in there, but it is recovering. We went down into Owens Lake, which was totally pretty much dry from last year. The spring gave it extra water, of course, and then Tropical Storm Hillary came along and filled up the lake. So they have to do this dust abatement for Owens Lake because it's so dusty. They've planted native plants. They're doing some of this these pond areas to contain the water, and then Hillary filled it up. So my observations with the LA Aqueduct is while they began taking all the water, and which to me is selfish, they took all the water. They wouldn't let the tribes have much water. Things started to dry up, but luckily the scientists got involved, the environmentalists got involved, and now this area is recovering. LA City owns most of the properties throughout the Owens Valley up to Mono Lake, and if they hadn't have taken that property, I just imagine this would be a giant megapolis in that whole area of the eastern Sierra. So while it seemed like a selfish thing to take water to LA, it did protect the environment up there, and it's really beautiful. The next slide, I had to take pictures of Mount Whitney from our hotel room. The first one on the left is from the evening. It had just rained, and then the next morning when we got up. And the tour pretty much ended at that point. And again, I would highly recommend any of the tours that the Water Education Foundation puts on. I have so many notes and so much information. I so happy to go through it. I wish I could share more, but it was definitely a worthwhile trip. And I appreciate the different agencies and the different people a lot more because I know what they do now and how it affects everybody. So thank you for that.
Audrey, excellent report, and nice to see everyone's valley recovering. Is there any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, good job, Audrey.
Thank you. Yeah, if you guys want any more info, I have tons of literature.
Okay.
I got one comment, Audrey, that instead of draining that lake 3 times, how about enlarging it for the farmers?
Well, yeah, write them a letter.
Okay, move on to item number 11, attorney reports.
I have something to share with the board tonight.
Okay, please.
I don't know if you're all aware, you probably read in the newspaper something about this Blue Triton new opinion from the State Water Resources Control Board. It has to do with Nestle and Arrowhead's 100-year-old appropriation of all that water in the San Bernardino Mountains that is essentially being bottled. It's been going on for years, and the theory was they have a bunch of boreholes in this mountainous area, and some of the boreholes are obviously the expressions of streams. So they got some licenses and permits from the state board for that, but they had a number of these, more than half of them, they claim were actually expressions of groundwater that's coming out under pressure as a stream. And they don't just sit there and look like that. They put boreholes in and get all that water into their wells. Well, this has been going on 2 or 3 years. They were challenged by some environmentalists. To make a long story short, the state board said, since a lot of these boreholes you put in there, you can see where the water was going before you bored the water out. It was going to express itself as a surface stream. So with that, we think that's evidence that when it was underground before you bored it, it was an underground expression of the same spring. And so they have held all that production as invalid and illegal and something that needs a state board license or permit. So it's a massive opinion that expands the jurisdiction of the state board over a lot of those sorts of water sources. That's going to have quite an impact. So I just thought I'd report that if you read something about it. If you read the opinion, it's about 80 pages. It's fascinating how much time the state board spent, 2 or 3 years, and how much money they spent coming to this conclusion.
Has that been going on for decades?
Actually, George, this particular investigation that had resulted in this opinion has been going on about 2 or 3 years, based on a lot of complaints about how that area has been dried up too much by environmentalists and other people. And it was, you can't see whether it's a stream or not if you bore into it. So they just let it go for 100 years, and now they've lost a water source.
Yeah,
a water source for some of their bottling activities.
Interesting.
It's very interesting to read.
Are they going after the water, that backwater then, all the water they pumped out of the ground?
There is no evidence they're going to try to find them or anything or restore that water to wherever they could. But they're not going to be able. They took the water and they used to run it down to a tank, basically, and they'd have trucks come down to slow the trucks up. Trucks drive down to the bottling plant. 100 years of this.
Yeah.
I'd say they lost 40% of their supply.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move on. Thank you much. Interesting report. Any item number 12, any requests for future agenda items? Okay. Number 13, we need to go into.
We do have a need for a brief closed session, items B and C.
Okay, so a motion would be in order to go into closed session.
I'll make a motion we go into closed session for items 3B and 3,
or 13B.
13B and 13C.
Yeah.
Director Dias, we have a motion.
Director Miller, second.
Director Miller, we have a second. Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy is no longer present, Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes.
Matt, would you like me to attend either one of those?
Yeah, Jim, you can sit in on both if you don't mind.
Okay.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you. So move me, Holly.
Will do. Hold on.
Recording stopped.